Hello everyone, welcome back. As you can see, very similar scenery to the last watch video on the update for the Grand Seiko. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my Omega Seamaster Professional. So I'm going to keep this video as short as possible because I don't like really long videos and I shouldn't put you all through that. So I've tried to make a video of this before and it turned out really long. I may use some little shots from that because I don't have all my stuff with me to take more well-lit close-up shots of this. Also, don't expect a huge list of specs on this because I'm not really a huge specs person. This is more or less my view, reviews on something and giving my take on it, my personal take on it. If you want specs, there's specs on the Omega website. There's plenty of other videos out there that can give you specs. But this is more or less a comparison between this and my Submariner. And how I feel about this, why I got it, stuff like that. Again, we're gonna try and keep this as short as possible. So we'll start with why on earth, if I've already got a Submariner, did I go out and get an Omega Seamaster Professional 300? So I'll put up here on the screen a photo of when I broke this. Yes, I did damage this. I broke the little pip at the 12 o'clock position on the bezel, and just in case you all didn't know, I repair equipment. I work in an industrial environment where I wrench on equipment and there's a lot of unforgiving surfaces. So there's a lot of times over the now 6 years that I've had the Submariner where I'm walking along and bam, this thing gets smacked really hard on a harsh edge, especially usually it's metal. And there have been so many times where I've thought, I broke my watch, and then I go and take a look at it, it's just fine. So there was one day where I was walking along and there was a very sharp edge and it just completely wiped the pip off the top of the bezel. It still kept good time. The hands didn't fall off, nothing like that. It didn't seem to crack the bezel, didn't break the glass or the crystal. So I wore it for, I don't know, a few weeks, a month or so, right? And I was kind of, I don't know, do I want to take it in? Do I want to take it in? It's a pain in the butt. I'm not going to have it back for months, stuff like that. I finally decided to bring it in, brought it in, dropped it off, and they packaged it up and sent it off. And in the environment that I work in, I write a lot in logbooks and stuff like that, and there's events where a lot of the automated equipment has an event log, and you're like, hey, what time is it? When did that go? So I use my watch quite a bit at work. And also when there's a lot of electronical stuff, there's also a lot of times where we're processing things with magnets in it. And I've had regular Seikos. You've probably seen some of the regular Seikos on the channel where, if I grab some of this stuff, by the end of my shift, my watch will be super fast. And then I gotta go home and I have a demagnetizing stand there and I'll put the watch on and demagnetize, stuff like that. So this has been fantastic at work. The magnetism doesn't affect it. It's got quick change date. It stays super accurate, stuff like that. So I can look at the time right now, look in a log, write things down, and it matters. It's pretty accurate. So going back to a regular Seiko, after like a week, I was frustrated. So I was like, okay, we're kind of done with this. I want to get something else. I'm desiring the same experience or similar experience that I had with this. Now, obviously, all of you know and understand that I think most Rolex dealers would love to have their shelves fully stocked of the watches, but at the same time, that's not the reality. And so anything was going to be a wait. So then I called the Rolex dealer that I bought this one through and had the issue with the Grand Seiko and stuff like that. And again, like I said, hey, we can get you one, but it'll just take time. But I kind of like one today, but so I'm going to look into something else. So I was in the store and they had this Seamaster on a rubber strap, the same color combination and everything. And I took a look at it and I liked it. Anyways, I got off on the weeds there. Anyways, I liked the one that they had on the strap, but they didn't have one on a bracelet in stock. It would have taken them, again, time to get it, maybe a few days or a week or whatever. But I called the local Omega boutique. And the local Omega boutique had one, not on display, one in the back, in the box, all wrapped in plastic and everything. I'll come down right now. Went in, took a look at it. It didn't even need any extra links. Put it on, it fit just fine. Paid him, and I said, hey, I got a question because, over the course of my life, I get fatter, I get thinner, I get fatter, I get thinner. What if I get a little bit too fat? Can I get an extra link? Yes, we can get you an extra link. For free. Just come in a week whenever we call you and pick it up. Editor Alex here. Yes, I'm doing a bit of a break in the video because I have totally lost any little bit of a whole minute touch of making and editing a good video. I did want to I did notice that there was some spots where like, this doesn't making any sense. So as I'm watching this back, I'm going to add a little bit of context here, because I'm going to get into some of the things that I like about the watch, some of the things that the watch has offered me. But I forgot to kind of include in there just simply the buying experience. To walk in, no BS, and just pick up the watch. You had it. They had it. I could walk in and get it. And then all the rest of the stuff that I'm going to get into here. So the buying experience was just excellent compared to the games that you have to play to get one of these. Just walk in, get it, get the one you want. I know there are Omegas that you can get that you can't get immediately, but a sub is just, it's a regular tool dive watch. You should be able to walk in and get one. Shouldn't have to be anybody special to get something like this, right? With Omega, you can do it. That adds to the experience. Back to the video. What was some of the features on this watch that kind of attracted me to it? So compared to the Seiko, the regular Seiko, that tends to experience problems in my line of work, this watch is highly anti-magnetic, supposedly. I mean, obviously I haven't put it in like an MRI machine or anything like that to test it, but this watch is supposedly super anti-magnetic. I've had this watch for, I think, something like 8 months now or something like that, and it's been fantastic. I wore it for I think I want to say about 2 months while this was in transit and all that kind of stuff in the background. And then I've rotated these off and on, and this performing flawlessly. Also, in terms of features, think of Rolex and it's +2, -2 seconds a day. There's a problem with that, kind of to some people, minus. If it's minus, over the course of a month, you could be a minute late. Omegas are +0 to +5 seconds a day, I think, is what their accuracy is. So you shouldn't lose time on this. Obviously, as we know, these things there is some human involvement to this and some variation to manufacturing to any of these watches. Your experience may differ, but I think it's supposed to always be in the positive in some way, shape, or form. I kind of like that feature about it. This does also have a quick change date. I don't think it's quite as slick as the one on the Rolex, but going on around midnight, hey, it changes within, I don't know, 10 minutes of midnight. So you're not like midday change. That was something that was very irritating about the regular Seiko. I don't know, an hour before midnight. It's starting to change, and so you really can't even read the numbers on it. You're like, oh, I don't know what day it is. And then you got to pull out your phone. It kind of defeats the purpose of having a watch. Also, I have the prior generation Submariner, which is 48 hours of power reserve. Again, this is not a spec video really necessarily, so don't quote me on the specs list, but I believe this has a longer power reserve than the prior sub. I don't think it has as good of a power reserve as the new sub, but if you're kind of looking at both, the used prior generation sub and this one should give you more off-wrist time before having to unscrew the crown and wind it, or having to put it on a watch winder, which I think for anybody that's interested in mechanical or automatic watches, that's more power reserve is usually a positive. And so I think that's a win for this watch as well. This extension of the bracelet is wonderful. I love it. That is like on my list of criteria. As you saw with the Grand Seiko, that was something that I thought was a neat addition to that Grand Seiko. Unfortunately, their clasp didn't seem to be made all that well. This seems like a fairly heavy duty clasp. Seems. Obviously your mileage may vary, but I haven't had any problems with it. It holds it in place. It seems to be decently well built. I'm very happy with it. Also, something that I haven't gotten on my Rolex is, and I don't think y'all can see it too well. There you go, kind of see it. An exhibition case back. Now, I wear my watch. I more or less, my watch lives with me. So I'm not sitting there going, ooh, look at the movement on the back. I'm just not. So an exhibition case back isn't like a deal breaker or anything, but hey, if it retains the same water resistance rating, what does it matter? So yeah, it's a plus point, but it's certainly not a deal breaker. So why not? It's got an exhibition case back. So now we'll talk about just a few of the negatives. There are a few negatives on this. Obviously, there are negatives that I can come up with on this, like the pip sticking out too far that broke it off to begin with to prompt me to get this. So there are negatives. I'm not saying this is perfect, and this is not perfect either. So one negative that I can just be very forward with you guys on, because I know I'm not alone. This is not some weird anomaly. They put an anti-reflective coating on the outside of this crystal. So any sort of, and I have not had any issues with the anti-reflective coating seeming to come off, but if there's any sort of like greasy oiliness that gets on there, it certainly stands out a lot more than on the sub. On here, you definitely notice greasy and oiliness to it. We'll move on from that, and we'll talk about like a negative with the bracelet. Although I give them absolute, complete, and total kudos for making like not just a variant of an oyster bracelet. They've got their own pretty cool bracelet design, but a couple negatives on it. It's actually kind of wide, which means that as you start to sweat, there's more sweat trapped underneath there, and it feels kind of after wearing it for a while, especially if you're working, and you know, the wider it is, the more heat it's going to trap and the more sweat you're going to produce. Quality of the bracelet though, doesn't seem to pull any hairs on my arms. I've been very happy with it. It's very comfortable when I wear it. Just occasionally you start sweating in it, and it tends to trap the sweat. It tends to feel a little bit funky. Now to add to that, the oyster bracelet has very few spots where dirt and gunk can accumulate. But if you take a look at one of these, if you get the chance to go into an Omega boutique, the more complex, I'm gonna see if I can block out my face and have it focus on the watch. The more complex that they make the bracelet, just like a Rolex Jubilee bracelet, the more little crevices where sweat and then dirt can accumulate in, and the more often you find yourself having to clean the bracelet. So although again, I think it's cool, I think it's well made, I think it tends to flow quite nicely. It tends to drape on the wrist quite nicely. I think the complexity of it tends to make it a little bit on the bulky side, and on the bulky side and the complexity of it tends to make it a little bit vulnerable to dirt and not looking as pretty or as fresh most of the time. It still looks pretty, but you tend to look at it and you go, ew. There's some dirt in this thing. Those, to me, in my view, are pretty much the only two real negatives that I see with this watch. Yeah, you can kind of nitpick on some things and say, oh, like on the Submariner, the date is white, the dial is black. On here, the actual date wheel is gray, the date numbers are black, but the gray date wheel mixed with the gray dial, it tends to blend in. Like, well, I can't see that, and it is really kind of small. So I've kind of grown accustomed to the Cyclops. The tiny little date on this, especially if the lighting's not quite right, you're like, what does that say? Let me put on my glasses. This is a feature of this one. This one doesn't seem to have that feature. The date is not as vibrant as you might expect from most tool watches. Two of the top features that have kind of attracted me to this are the similarities between the two. Obviously, they're certainly not the same watch, but the similar goal for the watches. This falls in a very similar category and seems to work very well for somebody who is a working tradesperson, but it's different enough. It's different. It's got that little splash of color with the blue bezel. It's got that weird wave motif on the dial where something like the Rolex is just plain black with, bam, a bunch of text. So I like the difference. I like the uniqueness, but same category. I like what they've done. I like that they've made it kind of their own. And the second thing that I like is just the overall quality of it, or at least perceived quality of it. In terms of the bracelet quality, it doesn't squeak. It's no more rattly than the Submariner bracelet. Everything seems to be built very robustly. Everything seems to be tight on it. The timekeeping ability, everything on this thing just seems to be pretty high quality. And at half the price, as well as the features, made it a very attractive watch. Anyways, I hope you all like this little bit of a comparison, a little bit of a review. Obviously not a whole bunch of specs on my Omega Seamaster Professional 300M, whatever. I think that the 300M is part of the name of it. I hope you appreciated this video. If you did, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and leave a comment down below if you want to interact, I guess. Thanks for watching.